engine. I can't believe it's made it through 6 episodes already and hasn't blown up. I'm going to be picking up where I left on the previous episode. This engine made 3 or 4 pounds of boost on turbo and nitromethane. At the end of that episode, I soon realized this bolt hole was open. It was a huge boost leak, so obviously it could have made more boost. And one of the biggest comments on that last video is, the turbo's too big, the engine's not going to make boost, the engine is getting flooded. So what I did is I plugged the bolt holes, put a new see-through head, and I'm going to just take it from there. First thing I'm going to do before jumping into this episode is start this thing up, see how much boost can actually make without that large boost leak. So that was a pretty good run. I knew it would make boost with this turbo. I knew it. It was leaking all of the boost out of that hole right there. I knew it. So I saw 3 pounds of boost, 3 or 4 pounds of boost for certain. As you can see, nitro clearly likes to run wet. I wasn't flooding it as much as everybody thought. I was just keeping it to where it sounded like it was running right, and it just happened to be wet. Well, there you go. The engine obviously makes boost. I'm going to address everybody's second concern. There were a lot of people that were worried that when I was spraying that nitromethane directly into the turbo, there was going to be an ignition source of some sort and the whole thing would catch on fire. Well, I'm going to do just that and see what happens. I've installed the see-through head. The engine's ready to go. Get my suit on. Ready to go. Can you imagine this engine with the see-through head running while it's on fire in slow motion? The ignition source that everybody was worried about. All right, let's do it. Prime it with a little bit of gas first. Godspeed, see-through engine on fire. Let's see if the fire aid works. Well, that was pretty easy. That's what happens if the nitro I was spraying into the turbo got ignited. Hopefully that answered everybody's question as to what would have happened if the spray that I was spraying into the turbocharger got ignited. And another thing that I noticed, I found it really interesting, was I know nitromethane has a cooling effect, but it became very apparent in the high-speed footage because you can see as I sprayed the engine down with the nitro, the fire was like right around here, and the more I sprayed, the more the engine got cooled by the nitromethane. It was kind of interesting to see. I think that cleared up all of the questions I got in the comments section. Now is the point that I move on and adapt the EFI system to this engine and get this episode underway finally. That was a lot of fun. Hopefully I answered a lot of questions people had. Now it's time for the most challenging part of this build, adapting the engine management system to this engine. Okay, I'm going to stop right here for a second because I hit a milestone. I finished hooking up all of the sensors and everything else to make this thing run. I want to show you what I hooked up so far, starting with everything in my hardware bay. The battery, which supplies power not only to the engine management system, but also to the pumps, relays, and anything else that uses power. My fuel tank, my oil reservoir that holds the oil that supplies oil to the turbo, fuel filter, fuel pump relay, fuel pump, fuel pressure regulator, oil pump relay, oil pump, and last but not least, the engine management system. Now I'm moving on to everything that's associated with the engine, starting with the most important part, the fuel injector. This is the fuel injector I have hooked up. It's a 1000cc injector. Everybody thinks this is going to be too big, but I'm not too sure. I think it might be just the right size. The throttle position sensor, and this basically feeds the position of the throttle to the ECU. This is the air temperature sensor. This is the idle air control valve. It's like a little stepper motor. It's a 4-wire idle air control valve. The crankshaft position sensor, the engine temperature sensor, and last but not least, the ignition coil, which supports up to 250 horsepower per cylinder. Now that I have that whole thing behind me, I'm excited to move on and build the last piece that I need for this project before getting this engine started, and that is the see-through intake and throttle body. I just finished building the see-through throttle body, a see-through injector port, getting all of the sensors in their final positions, as well as hooking up my e-throttle. Now I'm going to remove it from the bench, bolt it to its previous home, which is chained down to the concrete, because that is what it's going to take to keep this engine under control. I'm going to bolt on a stock head and then try to run this thing on gasoline. I have everything set up. Finally, I'm ready to try the first run on gasoline. But before I do that, I have to go into the ECU and adjust the pulse width of the fuel injector, because this fuel injector displacement combination is just something you normally wouldn't see. It's a 1000cc fuel injector paired up with the 3 horsepower engine, which is 8 cubic inches. So we're really going to have to run a very, very narrow pulse width for the fuel injector in order to get this thing into the right air-fuel ratio to make it scream. This is all a guesstimate, all of these numbers. This is a funny looking fuel map. I've never seen a fuel map so skinny like this. These are all in milliseconds. So it's 5 milliseconds, 4 milliseconds, 3 milliseconds. This is the time that the ECU is opening the injector. So when it says 5 milliseconds, that means that at 4,900 RPM, at this amount of load, the ECU is going to open that injector for 5 milliseconds every time it opens that injector. All right, here it goes. Let's see what happens. I think I got all the settings right. Let's see if this is magic. Oh. So it actually started up, and I'm going to go in here and make some little adjustments. amazing. That thing started right up and ran pretty good for the little bit of tuning that I did. Definitely better than when it was on a carburetor or when I was spraying the fuel directly into the turbo. I just have one issue. I have a lot of oil inside the turbocharger from when I reconfigured the oil lines, and I gotta burn that oil out. And I thought of just the thing to do it, anti-lag. Anti-lag is a feature that these engine management systems have, which, when enabled, retards the timing and burns most of the fuel after top dead center, so it gets sent out the exhaust into the turbocharger and creates a lot of boost with no load. First thing I have to do before starting it up again is go into the settings, turbo anti-lag settings, and enable anti-lag. So I picked digital switch 12 volt in. I set all my settings to a wonderful 6,000 RPM anti-lag limit. And that's about it. And here's my anti-lag table. So basically this is negative 30, negative 26 degrees when the anti-lag is enabled. All right, this is going to be our first run of this engine on anti-lag. Let's see what happens. Hopefully we don't smoke the turbo. That was 5 pounds of boost. 5 pounds of boost with no load. That turbo is definitely smoking now. Alright, so it looks like we burned most of the oil out of the turbo. That thing made about 5 pounds of boost. Now that I see it makes boost even on gas, it's time to do a proper dyno run on gasoline and turbo. I have Katya on the dyno. I'll be on the throttle. We're going to try to work together to keep the engine loaded to its maximum during the entire run and measure peak power. Then move on to the nitro. I'm going to have to remove this oxygen sensor because it looks like this is the first piece that's been damaged on this project. This is going to be the dyno run on 87 octane pump gas. Not even premium. This is regular, good old gasoline. Oh, we got fire in the intake. That's a good sign. Nice way to start it up. Okay, you ready? That was a full dyno run on gasoline. That was 87 octane pump gas, which is the cheapest gasoline you can buy around here. And to my surprise, this thing made 5.5 foot-pounds of torque at 4,400 RPM with over 2 pounds of boost. That's 4.6 horsepower, and that was pretty awesome. I mean, you can't get better than that. It made a whole 1.6 horsepower over the rated horsepower. So for those that are saying that this turbo won't make boost on this engine, well, you be the judge. I didn't do any crazy timing, no crazy anything. It was literally set up, running right, the right air-fuel ratio, and it just made boost. So the next thing I'm going to do is flush this whole system out and switch over to nitromethane. I'm thinking it's going to use about 4 times the nitromethane than it did gas. So I need to go into the fuel map and increase the fuel timing by 4. And then I'm going to start it up from there, do a little bit of tuning, and just full throttle it, do a dyno run, and see if we can blast this thing away with the nitromethane. Without further ado, let's get this thing started and see what kind of numbers it's going to make and see if we could cause some sort of destruction. I don't think this motor's ever going to blow, but we can only hope. All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Pretty impressive. We did 11 foot-pounds of torque at 5,000 RPM. That's 55,000. Divide that by 52 to get our horsepower. And that is 10.5 horsepower from a 3 horsepower engine. And take a look at how much nitro that engine burned in one run. That flask is 1,000 milliliters. It burned about 500 milliliters of fuel with that one dyno run. That's impressive. Let's take a look inside this combustion chamber after doing a dyno run with the turbo. Let's see what it looks like. Oh wow, look at that. It's weird. There's like, can you see the squares on there? It's like some squarish patterns on the head. That's weird. I've never seen that before. It's actually eating the head away. Ha ha ha. That's interesting. It actually ate the aluminum from the head. It looks like it did actually blow the head gasket like I thought. It sure did blow the head gasket, but at least we got one good run out of it. At this point, I was pretty much done with the episode, but I decided to do the dyno run on gas and the dyno run on nitro with the see-through head. And then out of nowhere, this happened. This should be fun. This is going to be the next run on gasoline with the see-through head. And I really didn't pay much attention to the spark gap because we have plenty of spark energy. Let's see what happens. The engine first started and then it was running kind of funny. It died out. That's super weird. I don't know what's going on with this ECU now. I started it again, and then it died out right away. And then I tried to start this engine for over 9 minutes. Then I realized the ECU wasn't picking up the crankshaft rotation any longer, and figured out that somehow or another, all of that spark energy coming through the block fried the crankshaft position sensor. There's no injector, pulse, and there's no spark from the ignition coil either. I tried to run the engine with the see-through head on gasoline, and I ran into some problems. I said earlier on in the video the importance of this timing wheel and sensor right here. Well, this goes to show you how important it is. It seems that this sensor has gotten damaged, so the ECU isn't picking up the RPM of the engine, and therefore we have no fuel, no injector pulse, no ignition, nothing. It seems like the ECU is picking up a random signal here and there just to start fuel pump and oil pump once in a while, but that's about it. So I'm going to end this episode right here. There was a lot of other things I wanted to do in this episode that I couldn't do just because the video was going to be way too long, but I am going to pick this up in another video. I want to do the dyno run on gasoline and nitro with the see-through head, maybe blow this head off, as well as show like anti-lag and a few other timing ideas that I have with the see-through head. But like I said, I'm going to pick that up in a separate video. Thanks for watching. Sorry for the wait. Hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Tell me what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe. Stay tuned. And that's about it. See you soon.